Hey YouTube, what's good? It's your boy Hedtec. I've been away for a bit and I apologize for that, but I've been kind of busy with school and working on some other stuff, as well as kind of trying to just get the clutter off my desk a little bit here. You know, it's like I got a small little workspace up here in Lab Minor, but I wanted to kind of make it so that it's kind of more open or whatever. So I ended up adding this like little shelf up here. Got my monitor up there, and I actually ordered some good mixing speakers, and they're going to be here next week. So they're good reference monitors. They're flat. And there's not too much bass, too much treble. They're perfect. So the funny thing is I'm going to do a mixing video for you today with these small little speakers I have, but I'm used to them. They're little JBLs, and they sound pretty good for this size room. And I wouldn't really put anything out with an accurate mix from these, but I'm just going to kind of give you the gist of the basics of mixing. Now, a lot of people, don't really understand what mixing is, or they've heard about it and they don't know all the little details and all that. But there's pretty much three fundamental things inside of mixing that'll help make your song sound nice and crisp and fat at the same time without a lot of frequency fighting and all the other mess, I use an MPC to make my beats. Now, you can track out from your MPC into your computer. Now, it's going to sound just like it does on the MPC. And a lot of times it's going to be muddy or too much bass, or it's not going to be real clear. It might sound pretty fat, but you know what I mean? It might not sound good through every single speaker. Like in your car is different than your home stereo, than your MP3 player. It's all different, So you want to have a consistent mix. Not only that, you kind of want to try to make it sound like there's space in between everything, Because if you just kind of record straight from your MPC into the computer and you didn't really pan anything or do any mixing in your MP, man, it's just going to sound real mushed together and squash, and you know what I mean? You want to make stuff sound beautiful, So I'm going to get into that today. But back to the three fundamentals of mixing. You're pretty much going to have some sort of, dynamic, like a compression or limiter or something like that as your first one. Your second one, you want some EQ. Third, reverb. And I'm not talking about long reverb or like big echoey sounds, but I'll show you some tricks on how to use reverb effectively, as well as compression and EQ, alright? Let's get to this. Alright, so I use Adobe Audition version 1.5. Yeah, it's kind of old. It's probably about 5 or 6 years old now. It used to be Cool Edit Pro, and that's the program I learned on and I'm comfortable with. I also use Pro Tools and some other, Acid and all that. But for mixing and editing, man, Adobe Audition is a great program. I mean, it's 32-bit. A lot of composers and people that do music for movie soundtracks and all that use this program. And to me, it's just because I've been using it forever, I seem real comfortable with it, but it also has a lot of options too, So if you're like a Pro Tools fan or whatever, don't hate on anybody else that uses what other methods. I mean, Audition is great. So when I tracked out, I did it a track at a time, and I showed you that in my tracking out video before. And some guy left a comment and gave me some shit like, oh, why don't you just transfer everything out like with a MIDI? You could do everything all at once. Don't show people this dinosaur method. And I'm thinking, first of all, let me break something down to you, okay? I've been doing this for a long time, okay? I started recording stuff on 4-track tape machines, okay? Part of the fun of recording for me is actually laying things down a track at a time, taking time with it, taking different edits. I'm not knocking MIDI. I'm not real familiar with it. It's been around forever, but I haven't really messed with it so much. You know what I mean? And I probably will eventually get into MIDI and multi-tracking and all that. But I'm kind of old school, and I just got to let you know that doing it a track at a time, man, that's part of the fun, man. It's even funner sometimes to mix a beat than it is to actually make it. You know what I mean? It's two separate kinds of fun, I guess. But I'm old school, so don't knock it. And if this is just the way I do it, and I really have fun doing it. So, Anyways, I laid everything down a track at a time. As you can see, I've got right here is my snare. This track right here is my kick, my hats, my samples, and my second samples. Okay, I didn't put any bass lines in this track yet. I might eventually, but you know, I kind of like the way it knocks right now. So let me stop wasting time. I soloed my snare track right here. Okay. Sorry about the camera work. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't really have real professional gear. Anyways, in Audition, you have some buses, effects buses. You know. And you can just pull that up here in this little screen. If you're using Cubase or Reason or whatever, I'm sure they all have their own little interfaces. And you know, I'm not real familiar with those programs. We're not as familiar, so you know, just kind of figure out on your own. If you could figure out a way to get your EQs, your compressions, and your reverbs linked up to your WAV file, your track, then you're golden. I'm just going to kind of show you some tips and some tricks to kind of make something sound good. You know what I mean? So right here on this screen right here, this is my this is pretty much my effects buses, and I have my dynamics processing here, which is going to be some limiter or compression or whatever. The next tab is some studio reverb. That's all I really have on the snare. I kind of like how the EQ already sounded going in. And the last one is the mixer. That's going to be on the left here. This is a fader for your dry out. That's pretty much the signal of the actual snare itself. You know what I mean? And then these two other columns. This is your the compression, and this is the reverb, and you can adjust the amount of compression and the amount of reverb that you put in there. So it's really cool. It's got a real dynamic feel. Now, on snares. First of all, let me put it this way. When making hip hop, you know, drums obviously are such an important factor. It's like the biggest thing, really. So whenever I mix the drums, I always mix from the perspective of the drummer. If you know what I mean, like I mix like I'm sitting in the drum throne and I'm behind the kit. So my snare is going to be kind of to the center, but off to the left a little bit of me, and then the hats are going to be more to the left. You know, my kick drum is going to be to the center and to the right. You know what I mean? And toms and all that are usually to the right and to the left. So whenever I mix drums, I usually have my snare just a little bit to the left, my hats even more to the left, like maybe at like 11 or 12 to the left, and my kick I'll put like 2 or 3 to the right. You know what I mean? That's going to give space in between your drums. You don't want everything right in the center. It's going to sound live that way, you know? So with the snare, I liked how it already had a little bit of reverb in it, the sample that I used the snare, so I didn't give it too much reverb. But a trick that you want to do is to give things space. You want your snare to kind of sound a little bit. Well, I like it like this, to sound a little bit farther out than your hats. You know what I mean? So what I did was I kind of put like a medium decay on the reverb. The room size is kind of small to medium. I'm going to bring the stereo width down, and my dry signal is going to be about 90% out. My wet signal is going to be, which is right here, is going to actually be like 25% out. You know what I mean? So let me show you what it sounds like without it. And you probably won't really be able to tell through this video. I mean, you know what I mean? So that's without it, and this is with a little bit of reverb. You can barely tell, but the thing is that it gives it a little bit of dimension and a little bit of space, and that's what you want. You want room in between your sounds. You know what I'm saying? So with the dynamics processing, I'm pretty much using a limiter. You know what I mean? Because it's already the snare was already compressed because I pulled it off a record, and I'm sure the engineers already compressed everything. You know, you don't want to over compress things, so I limited it a little bit. You know, and just use your ear. There's no real rule of thumb. You don't want to squash things with too much compression or like max things out with too much limiting. You know what I mean? But you know, let's hear what it sounds like with that dynamics processing. It's more crisp, more present, and with that little tiny bit of reverb on it, it just gives it some space. If you know what I mean. All right. So I'm going to move on to the kick drum. So let me